Hello there. How are you doing today? Well, I hope you are doing supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, because that's pretty much how I'm feeling right now. Anyway, welcome back to another episode of In the Kitchen. Today, I want to talk to you guys about something that I hope will be very helpful to you, and that is 17 essential pantry items that you will need in your plant-based or vegan journey. Let's get to it, shall we? One of the most important things you're gonna need in your pantry, lots and lots of beans. As they say, beans, a musical fruit. The more you eat, the more you toot. The more you toot, the better you feel. Beans in every meal. Beans are just one of those things that help fill up so many different recipes. Not to mention there are so many things you can do with beans. Of course, you can make black bean burgers, but beans are also used in another recipe to make a different type of burger. Of course, if you make a kind of pasta, you can put beans inside of it. There's chili. There are all kinds of soups and hummuses that you can make along with beans. Even with some of my pasta recipes, I might put beans in there just to make it more filling. Not to mention you can just eat beans as they are. Of course, with seasoning, you can make refried beans. So beans are an essential to have, unless of course you just don't like them. So now moving on to the next thing, you are going to need quinoa and rice. Let me just say, when I say quinoa and rice, I don't mean just get your regular, of course you're gonna get your regular old quinoa. They also have black quinoa, red quinoa, tricolored quinoa. Okay, saying quinoa a lot is kind of difficult, so I'm gonna stop. But you want to get quinoa. And then here's something absolutely wonderful about rice. When I say get rice, I don't mean just regular white rice, right? We've got lotus rice. I've got white arborio rice, brown rice, but I also have jasmine rice. It's important to have different types of rices because of course they all do different types of things. The texture of them or how they turn out might be different from each other. Like when I use the arborio rice, I actually made mushroom risotto, and it just gives you this nice, thick, rich, creamy feeling. It's very delicious. And I've used the jasmine rice to make Mexican rice. When it comes to, just regular rice, you just cook regular rice or rice with sugar and butter. And then even with brown rice, of course, I use that in my etouffee and jambalaya. So having a different variety of rices also helps. So yes, quinoa and rice. These are very, very delicious. They're also very filling, and of course quinoa is a great source of protein. Also, beans are a good source of protein, forgot to mention that. And of course, the thing I love about quinoa and rice is that you can make them for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It's all in how you season them. But speaking of breakfast, another thing that you should have in your pantry is oats. Rolled oats. If you want, you could have still cut oats, but I personally don't like those. But rolled oats are very good because of course, if you like oatmeal, you can make it. But guess what? There are so many things you can do with this. These are used to make no-bake cookies, bars. These are also used in another hamburger recipe that I know. You have versatility when it comes to oats. So guess what else you'll need in your vegan or plant-based pantry? Noodles. Simply put, look, everything that non-plant-based people can have, so can we. And so I've got spaghetti noodles, and look you guys, I don't have any special brand like the Banza or any of the quinoa type noodles and stuff like that. There are plenty of brands of noodles that actually don't contain egg, like the Kroger brand. So I've got my spaghetti noodles. I've got these really, really cool looking sfogliini pasta. I've got my lasagna noodles, macaroni noodles. I even have jumbo shells. And I've got linguine noodles. I've got linguine noodles. I've even used my foon brown rice noodles to make a dish. So you gotta have noodles because again, you can make tons and tons of vegan pastas. Like, your options are so limitless. The other thing you're gonna need is panko, or just some type of breadcrumbs. When it comes to living a plant-based life, one of the main places you can get your protein from is mushrooms. And we don't always just wanna have mushrooms seared on the stove, right? So if you wanna fry them, have you some breadcrumbs becomes, again, something regular that you would have in your normal pantry if you weren't plant-based, you can also have in your plant-based pantry. So now let's move to something that's not as common in a omnivorous person's pantry. Coconut milk. You are going to want this, I promise you. I love coconut milk. I make sure we never run out of it in our pantry because you can use it for so many things. Actually, I use it in a lot of my pastas. When I want them to be really thick and creamy, I will use coconut milk because it just adds to that creaminess, and it doesn't taste like coconut. After putting all of the ingredients in, it's so rich. I absolutely love it. I recommend you get it, again, because it elevates all of your pastas. It can elevate even your sauces. I've used it when I've made a tomato bisque and so good. So let's move on. Okay, so when it comes to flour, everyone knows that of course you can still just use all-purpose flour. But there are 3 types of flours that I think are wonderful. The first one is going to be my personal alternative to all-purpose flour, and that is besan flour. The other way to say that is garbanzo bean flour. For me, every instance in which I have used it, it works just as good as all-purpose flour, and it's better for you because it's the flour from chickpeas. So that's wonderful. And then there are 2 other flours that are very important in your vegan pantry. Number 1, tapioca flour. It helps to thicken some things up. So sometimes when I decide I want to make my own cheese, I will use the tapioca because it will help thicken it up so it's not as runny. Then you also have something like arrowroot flour. This is also good for thickening up your soups and sauces. But another thing that I love about it is that when I'm searing mushrooms on the stove, it helps to make them a little crunchier. I know not everyone does this, but even those who like eat regular chicken, I do know some people who would use arrowroot or cornstarch to bake their chicken in the oven and make it just as crispy as if it were fried on the stove. So those are 3 flours that you'll need. You'll also need nutritional yeast in your pantry. Nutritional yeast is a great thing to have in your pantry because it adds extra cheesiness to your foods, just gives it a little extra push. It's an excellent source of B12, but it also has like a nutty flavor, which is kind of nice. So I recommend you get this. It is gluten-free as well. Then we have our tahini. I really like tahini because, again, this is something that can add richness and creaminess to your foods. Again, this is actually something I use in my mushroom risotto and mushroom stroganoff and certain other kinds of pastas, so you'll definitely want to use tahini. So now for 2 sauces that you should have in your pantry, it's going to be Worcester sauce, or as I just like to go ahead and say, Worcestershire sauce, because that's how it's spelled English, and liquid smoke. Now when it comes to Worcester sauce, to me it just adds a really good flavor to the mushrooms or to your meats. But also when it comes to the liquid smoke, this is really good for people who want a smoky flavor added to their food, especially if you own a grill. Now as you guys can see, I've got a pantry with 1 shelf full of spices. There are just a couple of things that I actually want to directly point out to you. One of them is going to be thyme. I really love using thyme when it comes to making my mushrooms. They just cook very well together. So I honestly can't even explain why it works so well, but it is something that I recommend you get. But another thing that I have, you'll see here, is Himalayan salt black rock, or you could just call it black salt. I also have it in one of these things. It's Kala Namak. If you don't want to use a product like Just Egg to make eggs and you prefer to use tofu, you would use the black salt or the Kala Namak to give it that eggy flavor. Not to mention, if you want to make deviled eggs, you would put your mushroom, like the bottoms of baby bella or white button mushrooms, into a pickle jar, and with the pickle juice that's left over, and sprinkle some Kala Namak in there, and when it comes out, it's going to taste just like an egg. Tabitha Brown was not lying about that. So that is really the main purpose for black salt or Kala Namak. And speaking of giving things flavors to resemble something else, another thing you're gonna want is dulse and kelp granules. These here are really great when it comes to fishy flavors. Of course, you can also just buy seaweed and crumble that up to get fishy flavor. But these seasonings, I mean, you don't have to do all that work, just and you'll get your fishy flavor. So you'll want dulse and kelp. So another thing you'll need is either vegan bouillon cubes or vegan stock. When it comes to this, what it does is it's basically like a broth. And so usually, I'm about to make a nice creamy pasta. You will need this broth to add flavor to whatever it is that you're making. Also, when you're cooking quinoa, I always recommend putting in a bouillon cube or the stock because it really absorbs that flavor. And last but not least, the two things that I want to talk about are flaxseed meal and organic black chia seeds. I absolutely love using these so much. I often put chia seeds and flax seeds within my smoothies, and I even sprinkle chia seeds into my food, but not a whole lot because it does have more texture. But when it comes to flaxseed meal, I basically put this in every single recipe because it has no taste. Since it's me and my husband, depending on the amount of my food, I usually put like 2 tablespoons of this stuff, and I'm telling you, you cannot taste it at all, but it's very good for you, so I recommend that you have them. Also, it does help you go to the potty if you need to. So yeah. Alright, you guys, that is pretty much it. I hope that was helpful to you for when you go to the farmer's market or to the grocery store to fill up your pantry with all of these items. Again, I really love everything that I mentioned because they're so versatile in how you can use them in ways that people wouldn't have thought about. And of course, you can look up more ways to use all of these things that I talked about. And just remember, the kitchen is one of those places where you can be the most creative.